Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into programming interviews exposed today to help you, the listener, ace those software engineering interviews. But we're going beyond just summarizing the book.
Yeah, definitely. It's more about getting those core principles, like think about building a house.
Okay.
You wouldn't just, start hammering away without a blueprint, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
This book, it's like your blueprint, but for software engineering.
I like that. Okay, I like that analogy. So I'm getting ready for an interview. Where do I even start? It feels like I need like a roadmap or something.
Well, the book really pushes knowing yourself first.
Okay.
Like, what kind of software engineer are you? Are you drawn to the visual stuff like UI, UX? Or do you like to get down into the nitty-gritty, like the systems programming?
Yeah.
This self-awareness, it's important not just for targeting the right jobs, but also for presenting yourself the right way.
So it's not just about being a good coder. It's about showing off the right skills.
Exactly. And Programming Interviews Exposed has great advice on how to write your resume and how to build a portfolio that, really highlights your strengths.
Yeah?
It even talks about using these online platforms like Top Coder and
I hate
HackerRank.
those code contest sites.
Yeah.
Those always felt kind of intimidating to me.
Yeah, they can be. But they're also a fantastic way to, just practice your problem-solving skills and really get noticed by employers.
Okay.
And they expose you to different problems than you might see in your day-to-day work.
That's true. That's true. It's like, I don't know, cross-training for your brain.
Right.
Okay. But let's be real. Even with all the best prep in the world, there's still the interview, which can be super nerve-wracking.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But remember, the interview, it's a two-way street. It's just as much about you checking out the company as it is about them checking you out. And Programming Interviews Exposed, it gives you the tools to confidently navigate each stage from the the initial phone screens to those more intense on-site interviews.
Okay. So speaking of phone screens, any tips for how to get through those? They always feel like kind of a wild card.
Be ready to talk about everything on your resume. Seriously, everything.
Really?
Like that weird project you did in college, they might ask.
Oh, wow.
And, brush up on those common coding challenges like how to remove duplicates from a list.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The book uses that example to show how, these simple tasks can reveal a lot about how you code and how you solve problems.
Okay. I've always wondered, why is that problem, that specific problem, so popular in interviews? What makes it such a good test?
I think it's because it seems simple, but to actually do it efficiently, you have to really understand data structures like arrays and hash tables and stuff. Plus, it makes you think about all those edge cases, what if the list is empty? What if it's all duplicates? It's a really good way to see how a candidate, approaches a problem, how they break it down, how they write clean, readable code.
Oh, that makes sense. And then, after that come those, dreaded on-site interviews with the whiteboard coding and, a lot of pressure.
Take a deep breath. Programming Interviews Exposed. It's got you covered. It emphasizes how important big O notation is.
Yeah.
It's how you analyze, how efficient your code is. And the book has this great example. It compares two approaches, compare to mul and compare to max. And one is way more efficient than the other as the data set keeps growing.
So it's not just about getting the answer. It's about getting it in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, exactly. And big O notation, that's how you talk about that efficiency.
Right.
It's comparing two cars that both get you to your destination.
Right.
But one, it, uses hardly any gas, and the other one, it just guzzles it down.
Yeah, yeah.
Which one would you pick for a long road trip?
I'd pick the one that saves me money on gas, for sure.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's talk about what feels like the core of software engineering, data structures.
Yes. Data structures. They're the building blocks of all code.
Okay.
It's how we, organize and store information efficiently.
Right.
Think of them like different kinds of containers, like you wouldn't store your clothes in a soup pot. Right?
No, I wouldn't.
Exactly.
That's a vivid image.
Right.
So the book seems to really focus on linked lists. What's so important about them?
Linked lists are a really good way to understand dynamic memory allocation, where you can grow or shrink your storage as you need to.
Okay.
Plus, they come up a lot in those interview questions. The book breaks down like the usual linked list operations, like how do you insert elements, how do you delete them.
Right.
And it really stresses understanding the head and tail, which is like, the beginning and the end of your list.
So it's kind of like building a train
Yeah.
where, like, each car is a piece of data and you can add or remove cars.
Yeah.
Like, as needed.
Exactly. And you need to know how to like hook them up and unhook them without like derailing the whole thing.
Yeah.
In the book, it even gives you like code examples, like how to remove the head of a linked list so you can like visualize it.
Okay, so I'm guessing there are, like, potential derailments to watch out for, like
Yeah.
those null pointers and cyclic lists.
Oh, yeah. Those are like the coding equivalent of a train going in circles or like, hitting a dead end.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But programming interviews exposed, it helps you like recognize and avoid those problems.
Okay.
It really emphasizes careful coding and like thinking ahead about those edge cases.
It's really cool how these, like, abstract data structure things can, like, have real-world consequences.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're like the foundation for, making software that's really good. Yeah.
And speaking of building, let's move on from the linear world of linked lists and explore the branching structures of trees.
Trees, like family trees and stuff.
Well, kind of. In computer science, we often use a specific type of tree called a binary search tree.
Okay.
And each node, which is like a point on the tree, it has a value, and all the nodes to the left have smaller values, and all the nodes to the right have larger values.
Okay.
And this structure, it lets you do these super fast searching and inserting and deleting operations.
So it's like a perfectly organized filing system then.
Yeah, exactly. And programming interviews exposed, it goes into, like, how to navigate these trees.
Okay.
Especially using a technique called pre-order traversal.
Traversal. Is that like taking a scenic hike through the branches of the tree?
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's a way to systematically visit every node in the tree. Like, imagine you need to, like, print out the whole tree structure.
Sure.
Hot copy,
Yeah.
Pre-order traversal, it gives you, like, a specific order so you don't miss anything. Okay, and the book emphasizes doing this without recursion, right?
Right.
Which I've heard can be, like, tricky.
Yeah, recursion, it can be really powerful, but it's not always the best way.
Okay.
The book shows you how to get the same results using iteration, which is often like using loops and stuff. It's a good example of how, like, once you understand the ideas, you can solve problems in different ways
Okay.
and adapt to, different situations.
It sounds like there's a lot more to uncover with this tree.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, maybe we should, like, take a little detour and explore something else that comes up in interviews all the time. Graphs.
Oh, yeah, graphs. They're all about, like, modeling relationships and connections. Think of like social networks or transportation systems or even like the internet.
Okay.
All of these can be like represented as graphs. The nodes are like the entities and the edges are the connections between them.
I'm starting to see the connections, pun intended. So how do graphs fit into, like, programming interviews?
Well, programming interviews exposed, it uses the, that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing.
Yeah.
Uses that to show the power of graphs and graph algorithms. It's a fun way to like see how you can use algorithms like breadth first search to find, the shortest path between any two nodes.
Okay, so breadth first search, it's like a systematic way of, like, checking all the possible connections to find the fastest route.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you're casting a wide net and exploring all the paths level by level until you get to like where you want to go.
Yeah.
And this kind of algorithm, it's not just for like Hollywood connections. It's used in like GPS navigation, network routing, even social media analysis.
It's amazing how these, like, seemingly abstract concepts have such real-world applications. And I'm guessing that understanding graphs is, like, a really valuable skill for software engineers.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're everywhere in software. And knowing how to work with them, it's like essential for making efficient algorithms.
Okay, well, I feel like we've already covered so much, but I know there's still more to explore. Maybe we should tackle that mind-bending topic we mentioned before, recursion.
Recursion. It can make your head spin, but it's also incredibly elegant and powerful, when you get it.
Yeah.
It's all about like breaking down a problem into smaller, like self-similar sub-problems.
Okay, break that down for me a bit more. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Okay, so imagine you're trying to like solve this complicated puzzle.
Okay.
Recursion, it's like you have this magic mirror that lets you break that puzzle into smaller but like identical puzzles.
Okay.
And you just keep breaking them down until you get to pieces that are so simple you can solve them directly.
Okay.
And then you just combine those solutions to, like, solve the original puzzle.
So each recursive step is like looking into the mirror and seeing a smaller version of the same problem.
Exactly. And Programming Interviews Exposed, it uses this classic example of the factorial function to, like, illustrate recursion. The factorial of a number, it's like just the product of all the positive integers, less than or equal to that number.
Right.
And you can calculate it recursively by calling, like, the factorial function inside itself, but each time with a smaller number until you get to the simplest case, which is the factorial of 1.
So it's like a chain reaction. Like each step triggers the next one,
Yeah.
but with a smaller problem to solve.
Precisely. And eventually, you hit that base case and all the solutions kind of like cascade back up and you solve the original problem.
Okay, so I'm starting to see like the elegance of recursion, but I've also heard it can be tough to like implement correctly. Are there any like pitfalls?
Yeah, there are. One of the biggest ones is those Stack Overflow errors.
Oh, right.
If your recursive calls go too deep, you can run out of memory. Programming Interviews Exposed, it highlights these trade-offs.
Okay.
It emphasizes knowing when recursion is the right tool and when other approaches, like iteration, might be better.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job, kind of like with those data structures we were talking about before.
Exactly. And speaking of choosing the right tool, let's move on to another big topic that comes up in interviews a lot: sorting algorithms.
Oh, yeah, sorting algorithms. That seems pretty straightforward. Just, put things in order.
It might sound simple, but there's actually a lot to sorting algorithms.
Okay.
Just like with those data structures we talked about, there are different approaches, and they all have their own, strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
And Programming Interviews Exposed, it goes beyond just memorizing code. It helps you, like, understand why you might choose one sorting algorithm over another.
So it's not just knowing how to sort. It's about knowing why you'd pick a specific way to do it.
Exactly. It's like having a toolbox full of different sorting tools.
Okay.
You wouldn't use a hammer to, like, screw in a screw, right?
Okay.
Each sorting algorithm has, like, its own, personality, its own efficiency, and its own, like, best use cases.
Okay, so I'm starting to see that there's more to sorting than I thought. What are like the key things to think about when choosing a sorting algorithm?
The book talks about 3 main things: efficiency, stability, and memory usage.
Okay.
Efficiency is about, like, how fast it can sort. Stability is about whether it keeps the order of, like, equal elements the same. And memory usage is about, how much extra space the algorithm needs.
So it's like picking the right sorting hat for your data based on like its personality and the task at hand.
Exactly. And Programming Interviews Exposed, it really digs into the details of different sorting algorithms, like quicksort, merge sort, and even more specialized ones. It helps you, like, see their trade-offs and when each one is the best choice.
I'm already feeling like more prepared to tackle those sorting challenges. But I also know that there's more to software engineering than just data structures and algorithms, right? Like, what are some other important things that Programming Interviews Exposed talks about?
Well, the book, it goes beyond just the code, and it gets into, like, those broader principles. For example, it talks about object-oriented programming, or OOP,
Right.
which is a powerful way to structure your code.
Yeah.
It also touches on thread management and concurrency, which is essential for building applications that can, handle lots of tasks at once.
Those sound a bit more advanced. Why are they important for someone who's like getting ready for an interview?
Well, even if you're not, like, an expert in those areas, having some basic understanding, it shows that you're thinking beyond just the individual lines of code, and you're considering, the bigger picture of how software is, like, designed.
So it's like showing you're not just a coder, you're a thoughtful engineer who understands the whys behind the code.
Yeah, exactly. And Programming Interviews Exposed, it helps you, like, develop that understanding. It even covers things like garbage collection, which is how different programming languages manage memory automatically.
Garbage collection. That sounds interesting. Is it like a self-cleaning kitchen for your code?
Yeah, you could think of it that way. It's a crucial part of, like, modern software development. And understanding how it works can give you a deeper understanding of all the complexities of making software.
Well, I feel like my brain is like full.
Yeah.
But in a good way.
Yeah.
We've covered so much in this deep dive. What else does programming interviews exposed have for us?
Well, there's still more. In the next part, we're going to look at, things like coding style, how to debug your code, and how to approach those system design problems. We'll also talk about how to handle those tricky behavioral interview questions.
Okay, that sounds like a great way to wrap up our deep dive. I'm already feeling much more prepared to tackle those software engineering interviews.
That's great. Remember, preparation is key. And programming interviews exposed, it gives you the tools and the knowledge you need to, face those interviews confidently. Welcome back. I'm excited to continue our exploration of programming interviews exposed. We've covered a lot, from data structures and algorithms to those broader ideas like object-oriented programming and concurrency.
Yeah, it's been like a ton of information, but like in a good way. I feel like I'm starting to like see how all the pieces of the software engineering puzzle like fit together.
That's great to hear. And now we're going to step into the world of design patterns.
Okay.
They're like these proven blueprints for solving common software design challenges.
Design patterns, okay.
They're not like specific bits of code. They're more like time-tested strategies for, structuring your code in a good way. And programming interviews exposed, it introduces several common design patterns like singleton, builder, iterator, observer, and decorator.
Those are some interesting names. Can you give me like an example of how one of these patterns might be used like in the real world?
Yeah, sure. Let's take the singleton pattern. Imagine you're building an application that needs to like log events to a file.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to create like multiple instances of your logging class, each one writing to the same file. That could be like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem.
Mhm.
So how does the singleton pattern like help with that?
Well, the singleton pattern, it makes sure that there's only one instance of your logging class no matter how many times you try to create it. So this guarantees that all parts of your app, they're using the same logger, writing to the same file in a consistent, controlled way.
So it's like having one designated logging expert
Yeah.
who handles all those logging requests from different parts of the app.
Exactly. And the book, it goes beyond just describing the patterns. It even has this section called design pattern problems, which gives you a chance to like actually apply them.
Oh, okay, cool. Are there any like particularly challenging ones in that section?
One that stands out is implementing the singleton pattern in a way that's thread safe.
Right.
In a multi-threaded environment where like different parts of your app might try to create the singleton at the same time, you got to be really careful to avoid race conditions.
Right. So it's like having, I don't know, multiple chefs in a kitchen all trying to grab the same ingredient at the same time. You need to like coordinate them so they don't bump into each other.
Exactly. And programming interviews exposed, it walks you through all those tricky bits of thread safety and how to make the singleton pattern work well in that kind of multi-threaded context.
Okay, so it sounds like design patterns, they're a pretty valuable tool for any software engineer, like not just for interviews.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding them can really like level up your code, making it more reusable, easier to maintain, and able to handle, bigger, more complex problems.
Okay, I'm definitely learn more about design patterns to my to-do list. But before we move on, I wanted to like circle back to something we talked about earlier, recursion.
Recursion, always a fun topic. What about it?
I'm still trying to get my head around when you would choose recursion over iteration. Like, are there specific times when one is just clearly better?
Yeah, that's a good question. Recursion, it can be like super elegant and concise for certain types of problems, especially ones that involve like those hierarchical data structures we talked about, like trees.
Yeah.
It often like mirrors the structure of the problem really well.
Okay.
But, recursion can also be less efficient than iteration in terms of like how much memory it uses.
So it's a trade-off between elegance and efficiency then.
In a way, yeah. And programming interviews exposed, it really stresses that you need to like understand those trade-offs. Sometimes, a simple iterative solution might be more practical than a recursive one.
So it's all about picking the right tool for the job, just like with data structures and sorting algorithms.
Exactly. And programming interviews exposed, it gives you the knowledge you need to make those decisions well. It encourages you to think critically about different approaches and weigh their pros and cons.
Okay, that's really helpful. And speaking of problem solving, let's shift gears and talk about another big topic that always comes up, algorithms.
Algorithms, the heart and soul of computer science. They're sets of instructions for, solving problems. They're like the recipes that turn data into like meaningful results.
So algorithms are like the blueprints for how our code should work on data.
Exactly. And just like recipes, there are different algorithms for different tasks. Some are more efficient than others, some are more specialized, and some are more general purpose.
I bet Programming Interviews Exposed goes into some of those key algorithms that interviewers love to ask about.
You bet. It covers a wide range, from the classics like sorting and searching to more advanced techniques like graph traversal and dynamic programming.
Right.
It not only explains how they work, but also dives into their complexity analysis.
Complexity analysis. That sounds kind of intimidating. What does that involve?
Complexity analysis, it's a way to like measure how an algorithm's performance changes as the input gets bigger.
Okay.
We use big O notation, which we talked about before, to express that relationship.
Yep.
It helps us understand like how much longer an algorithm will take to run as the input grows.
So it's like measuring, I don't know, how much more gas a car uses as you add more weight to it.
Precisely. And knowing the complexity of different algorithms, it helps you make smart choices about which one to use for a specific problem.
That makes sense. I'm starting to see how all these different ideas like data structures, algorithms, design patterns, complexity analysis, how they all like work together.
They do. And Programming Interviews Exposed, it does a fantastic job of like tying all those concepts together.
Yeah.
It presents them in a way that's both comprehensive and approachable.
Okay, well, my brain is full again. But in a good way. We've covered so much in this deep dive. What else is there in Programming Interviews Exposed?
There's still more. In the next part, we'll get into some of those finer points of coding style, techniques for debugging, and how to approach system design problems.
Okay.
We'll also talk about strategies for those sometimes tricky behavioral interview questions.
Okay, that sounds like a great way to wrap up our deep dive. I'm feeling much more prepared to take on those software engineering interviews.
That's fantastic. Remember, preparation is really important. And Programming Interviews Exposed, it gives you those tools you need to go into those interviews with confidence.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're in the final part of our exploration of Programming Interviews Exposed, and like I say, I'm feeling like I've really leveled up my software engineering knowledge.
That's awesome to hear. We've definitely covered a lot, from the basics of data structures and algorithms to, those more advanced concepts like design patterns and complexity analysis.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but I know there's still more to uncover. What other gems does Programming Interviews Exposed have for us in this final part?
Well, we've talked a lot about the technical side of software engineering, but there's another really important element that often gets overlooked, and that's coding style.
Coding style. Okay.
It's like, think about the difference between like a functional but messy room and a well-organized, aesthetically pleasing space.
Okay, I see the analogy there. So what makes for like good coding style? Is it just about like making your code look pretty?
It's more than just aesthetics. Good coding style is about writing code that's clear, concise, and easy for anyone to understand. Not just you, but also anyone else who might, need to read or change your code later on. Programming Interviews Exposed, it emphasizes using meaningful names for your variables, writing well-structured code, and adding comments to explain, what you're thinking.
So it's kind of like writing a good essay.
Yeah, exactly.
You want your ideas to like flow logically, and you want the reader to be able to follow along without getting lost.
Exactly. And just like with writing, there are, conventions and best practices for coding style that can make your code more readable and easier to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
The book has some really good advice on how to develop good coding habits.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I know from experience that like poorly written code can be a real nightmare to debug.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Speaking of debugging, does Programming Interviews Exposed offer any like tips on how to do that effectively?
It does. Debugging is it's an essential skill for any software engineer, and the book gives you some practical strategies for finding and fixing those pesky errors in your code.
Okay.
It encourages a systematic approach. Start by really understanding the error message, then, try to isolate the problem area, and finally test your fix really thoroughly.
So it's like being a detective, following the clues to track down the the bug in your code.
Exactly. And just like a good detective, you got to be patient, methodical, and persistent. Debugging can be super frustrating, but it's also, really satisfying when you finally figure it out and your code works like it's supposed to.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that feeling. Now, we've talked a lot about coding at like the individual level, but
Yeah.
what about like designing whole systems? Does programming interviews exposed cover that part of software engineering?
It does. It's got a whole chapter on system design, which is becoming, more and more important in interviews, especially for those more senior roles.
System design.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty intimidating. What kind of things do you need to know to like nail those interview questions?
Well, those system design interviews, they usually involve like coming up with a high-level architecture for a complex system. Think of like a social media platform or a ride-sharing app. You got to think about things like scalability, reliability, performance, and security.
Well, yeah.
Programming interviews exposed, it gives you a framework for tackling these problems. It breaks them down into steps and gives you strategies for making good design choices.
So it's like being an architect, but for software.
Yeah.
Instead of designing buildings, you're like designing these complex software systems.
Exactly. And just like an architect, has to think about structural integrity and aesthetics, a software architect has to think about data flow, user experience, and the overall strength of the system.
It's a lot to think about. It sounds like those system design interviews really test your ability to, think critically and solve problems at a higher level.
They do. And programming interviews exposed, it gives you those tools to approach these challenges with confidence. It encourages you to, think systematically, consider those design trade-offs, and communicate your ideas clearly.
I'm definitely going to have to brush up on my system design skills.
All right.
But I'm also curious about those behavioral questions that come up in interviews. Those always seem a bit tricky.
Yes, behavioral questions. They're designed to, assess your soft skills, your personality, and how you handle challenges and work with other people. Programming interviews exposed, it actually has some really good advice on how to prepare for those.
So it's not just about your technical skills.
Right.
It's also about who you are as a person and how you interact with others.
Exactly. Software engineering is a team sport, and interviewers want to make sure you'll be a good fit,
Yeah.
The book suggests using something called the STAR method, which stands for situation, task, action, result, to structure your answers to those behavioral questions. Give concrete examples that show off your strengths.
The STAR method. Okay, that sounds like a good way to organize my thoughts and present my experiences in a way that makes sense.
It is. And practicing your answers to those common behavioral questions can really help you feel more confident and prepared when they come up.
Well, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive into programming interviews exposed. I feel like I've gained a much better understanding of what it takes to be successful in software engineering interviews.
That's great. And remember, it's not just about the interview, right?
Right.
The things you learn from this book, they'll help you throughout your whole career.
Yeah, it's an investment in your future for sure.
Yeah.
So as we wrap things up here, what are some key takeaways that our listeners should keep in mind as they, start their own software engineering journeys?
Well, first and foremost, preparation is key.
Yeah.
Programming interviews exposed, it gives you that roadmap, but you gotta, put in the time and the effort.
Right. It's like having a great set of tools, but you still need to know how to use them.
Exactly. Second, don't be afraid to keep learning. Software engineering is always changing, so stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop learning new things.
It's a journey, and programming interviews exposed can be your trusty guide.
Absolutely. And lastly, remember that software engineering, it's not just about, banging out code. It's about solving problems, working with others, and building amazing things that, make a difference in the world.
That's a great point to end on. So to all our listeners out there, keep coding, keep learning, and keep building. And until next time on The Deep Dive, happy coding.